The 90s Clone Saga is potentially one of the most infamous comic book stories ever told. However, for a number of reasons, it's also one of my favorites. In particular because it was the storyline that introduced the world to my favorite superhero, the Scarlet Spider. Recently on the channel, I started a series called Clone Saga Quick Reviews, where I give you my thoughts on each story from the 90s Clone Saga. In the last video, I talked about the double part 2, where we saw the Spider-Man clone escape the clutches of Miles Warren, only to be blindsided by the sudden appearance of the clone of Gwen Stacy, before being captured once again by the Jackal. But in today's Clone Saga Quick Review, we'll be checking out the flipbook story from Adjectiveless Spider-Man number 51, the double part 3, Who Am I?
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another carrotscraps video, and by another, I mean the 142nd. Now, of course, as usual, before we get into the video, I wanted to talk about a couple of things up front. First of all, I wanted to remind you that if you wanted to follow along with this story, there are a couple of ways that you could do so. By checking out the Spider-Man Clone Saga Epic collections, either in trade paperback or digitally, by checking out the Spider-Man Clone Saga Omnibus, or by looking up the issue number and reading on Marvel Unlimited. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the issue, let's briefly talk about the events of the story and a little about the book itself. So, like the other issues that we got this month, this is another holographic Spider-Man comic. And again, like I said, I know this is a gimmick, and I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fan of these, but I really like these holographic covers. I think they look really cool. And I also like the artwork for them, aside from the holographic nature of them. However, all of that being said, I did notice with this issue in particular, there seems to be a warping effect to the comic book cover that I have to assume is because of the holographic part of the book. The other comics that we talked about this month didn't have this, but there's this, I guess it's like bending upward, and again, I feel like this has to be because of the holographic effect, which is definitely a bummer. You know, obviously I want to have these as long as possible, so it's sad to see the kind of comic do damage to itself, essentially, but I could also be wrong about this. It might be doing this for some other reason, I don't know. Moving on, in the last episode of Clone Saga Quick Reviews, we briefly talked about letters pages, and so I wanted to quickly read a short letter from this issue, and we could talk about it really quickly. Now, each letters page typically has a title, like a name, and this one for Adjectiveless Spider-Man was called Crawl Space, and I haven't read, like, any of these letters ever. I think I've occasionally read one or two in the past, but none that were like committed to memory, so this is a completely new experience for me. And the letter I wanted to read today comes from Frank. Dear Crawlspace, I just finished Spider-Man number 48. The art was by far the best I've seen in any of the Spider books. Mackie, Lee, and Hannah are an excellent team, and I hope they're here to stay. Demogoblin's death, I don't know if it's Demogoblin or Demogoblin, I never know, surprised me. He was one of Spider-Man's most interesting enemies. By saving the little girl, he proved that he was not entirely evil. I'm looking forward to seeing how Spider-Man handles the new, more powerful Hobgoblin. And I can't wait to see how the story with Vladimir Kravinoff turns out. As to the mysterious figure that keeps showing up, could it be Peter Parker's long-lost mutant brother, Grasshopper Man? Nah. The answer to this letter was, we hope the conclusion of the Kravinoff plotline in issue number 50 was all you expected, and as you can see, we have no intention of slowing things down. And then in parentheses it says, Grasshopper Man? With a bunch of question marks and exclamation points, and I have to agree with the answer here. Grasshopper Man is a huge piece of lore that I've never heard before. Obviously, you know, just a joke, but first of all, they're definitely talking about the clone of Peter Parker that was mysteriously showing up in issues before the Clone Saga started. That was a thing that was going on for a little while, although it could be another mysterious figure now that I think about it. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's the clone of Spider-Man that they were talking about. But this Grasshopper Man reveal, this title, I love this so much. It's kind of interesting that they mention a long-lost Peter Parker brother when, honestly, Ben Reilly kind of feels like a brother. I feel like people accept him as a brother to Peter, so this guy was closer than we thought. However, Peter Parker's long-lost mutant brother Grasshopper Man is just such a funny little detail from a letters page, and moving forward, I'm definitely going to be referencing this way more often. Grasshopper Man is clearly an important part of of Spider-Man history that we've unfortunately ignored up until now. Anyway, that's just one letter from the letters page to give you a taste of what that's like. Anyway, let's focus more on the issue that we're reading today. The story I'm talking about today is the double Part 3 Who Am I? And it is the flipbook story from Adjectiveless Spider-Man number 51, which came out in October of 1994. The story was written by JMD Mateus, pencils were done by Liam Sharp, Robin Riggs was the inker, and Steve Dutro was the letterer. Now in this issue, we see the events that lead immediately up to the original fight between Peter Parker and his clone. The main bulk of this story is the Peter clone looking back on Peter Parker's memories in an attempt to gain his self back, which turns out to be a trick by the Jackal to make this clone more authentic, just before they are pitted against the real Peter Parker for a battle. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about what I thought of this issue. So this issue really goes over the hypnotism and the kind of brainwashing angle that I touched on in the last story. It's really taken more seriously here, and we get a front row seat as to what this clone is going through, what it's like to exist in a body with memories surfacing that you don't recognize, and what it's like to be brainwashed or to be hypnotized. It's a very serious story, and it's very traumatic, and it's very heartbreaking. There are a lot of moments where this clone is experiencing these iconic moments and these traumatic moments in Peter Parker's life almost for the first time and yet once again. And the Jackal is standing behind him, basically mocking him throughout the whole issue. I do think it's an interesting place to take this story. Again, the idea of watching hypnotism happen or watching brainwashing happen is an interesting perspective, I think, for the story to take. It's a very silly plot point that typically is made fun of, and so to take it seriously and to give a perspective that I haven't really seen before is definitely really cool. I do think that it's interesting that they put so much focus on the death of Peter's parents in this issue, and they talk about how this is a huge origin point of trauma for who he is as a person, and I don't necessarily doubt that, and I could be wrong on this, but I just think it's interesting that this wasn't really something prior. I know he obviously had conflict about his parents before, but I just feel like they give so much importance to that, death in this issue, and I thought that was really interesting. It's really heartbreaking watching this clone experience these memories and kind of regain themselves, kind of, pull themselves up and say, I am who I am, and it doesn't matter if I'm perfect, I'm still me, and all of that to be this big triumphant moment only for it to shatter, because that's what the Jackal wanted this clone to do, was to gain themselves. There's something really twisted about it. At first I wasn't really into it, because this is a moment that we see a lot where, Peter has some conflict and then he bravely declares, you know what, I might not be perfect, but I'm me. I feel like that happens a lot. Even though I love that moment, I feel like it happens pretty frequently, and so I was ready to criticize it, but seeing it from the perspective that this was the Jackal toying with Peter and seeing that kind of triumphant attitude is almost like mocking him, like his self-confidence in that moment is completely undercut by the fact that the Jackal created this scenario for him to do that, and him doing that was part of his plan, so that way he could basically finally become Peter in personality, so that way they could prepare for this conflict. It's definitely, I wasn't the biggest fan of it at first, but once I started thinking about it a little bit longer, it's a really dark moment that works pretty well. Once again, I'm going to criticize the Jackal though as something that doesn't really work well. I'm always teetering left and right on the Jackal. I think I'm almost always going to be more critical than I am celebratory of the character, but he's mostly narrating this story in a way that I don't feel is super natural. He does these little things where he's like, yes, that's right, Peter, you did this and you are ashamed because you felt like that. And I don't know, it feels like he's mocking him, of course, but there's like an element of like truth to it that feels a little weird for the Jackal to be, the narrator of this story. I don't know. Obviously he's mostly an antagonist and he's mostly ridiculing Peter by kind of narrating his life, but there were some moments where I was like, I would prefer this story not be narrated by this person, or if maybe narration isn't the best word, but you get what I'm saying, that the Jackal is kind of guiding us through this little tale. And the other thing about the Jackal that I always just think is interesting is how much he knows about Peter Parker's life. I mean, he has to by definition, right? He's poking around in his memories, but it's always weird to me when we find out just how much the Jackal knows about who Peter is, how he thinks, his trauma. It's just weird. It's almost, I just feel like there's a little bit too much of the writer in the Jackal, and the moments when he's joking and mocking Peter, it just feels a little too on the nose and a little too silly for the dark tone of the story. And then the moments when he's not being as humorous, it just feels like the writer is talking through the Jackal to make some point about Peter Parker, and I just don't like that, because again, the Jackal should not be making points or good points. He sucks. But yeah, so I'm kind of torn on the Jackal in this issue. Something else I was torn on was the artwork. At first, I was gonna say that I don't like the art in this issue, and there are definitely panels that I don't like. There are some faces that are a little distorted for my liking, but I think overall I actually do like the artwork in this issue, and more specifically, I like the page layouts, and I like the art direction. There are a lot of panels that look really cool, even if I don't love the artwork especially. It's more so the composition of the shot that I love. For example, there's this great shot where Peter is surrounded by, of course, the floating heads of guilt, and then behind him is Miles Warren split with the Jackal's face, and then MJ on one side, Gwen on the other, and the burglar in the background. That's a really well-composed shot. I think it looks really cool. This is probably, one of my favorite Spider-Man shots. It's just such a cool looking image. However, I just don't love the artwork, again, especially when it comes to illustrating these two women, MJ and Gwen. I just don't think that they did the best job, which sucks because it feels like everything else is doing, pretty good. Honestly, I don't have an issue with the way that MJ is illustrated, but it's more so Gwen, and then Gwen combined with MJ that's just like, oh, you're just drawing every woman like this. But the composition of the shot is really interesting and really cool. There's a shot where the Jackal is like sticking his tongue out between his teeth, and that's just such a cool little detail. I don't know, there's something about that feels really unique. I love giant eyes on my Spider-Man. However, I do think that the eyes go a little too far in this issue, and not because they're too big. I actually like them when they're too big, but they just get weirdly misshapen. They do the sad Spider-Man eyes thing, and I do like when the Spider-Man eyes move, don't get me wrong. But the sad eyes, where it kind of ovals out in a weird way, has never been my favorite. There's another really awesome Spider-Man panel where he, the clone punches the Jackal, and the Jackal has this twisted face where he just got hit really hard, and Peter has this great pose. Sorry, Peter, the clone has this great pose, and then the background is this amazing black and purple, and it just looks really cool. I like all the lights in the background. I like how surreal it is, especially for the story that they're telling. Miles Warren, I think, looks really good in this issue, and I really love when they distort his face and he starts transforming into the Jackal. I really do like a lot of the art in this issue because it reflects this kind of, a bizarre otherworldly story about like hypnotism and brainwashing. Of course, the visual elements are going to be distorted a little bit, and I think the artwork reflects that pretty well, even if it's not the best artwork that's out there. So in the end, I would say that I like this issue. I think I would say that it's maybe my least favorite of the three that we've read so far in the Clone Saga. However, I do like the idea of taking this element of brainwash, right? It's such an easy, simple thing where it's like, oh, they were brainwashed, or, oh, why did they do that? Oh, well, they were hypnotized. I like that it takes that a little bit more seriously and reveals a tragedy behind it, and it's uncomfortable, and it's disturbing, and it's sad seeing the process of somebody being hypnotized or brainwashed. I think that's a really unique element of the story, and I like that a lot, and I really like the artwork. But overall, it's definitely my least favorite of the stories we've read so far. If I was going to give it a rating out of the word rating system that we've been using so far, which I'm probably going to change that in the future, I would probably give this an interesting out of words. I think this is an interesting story, even if it's not a great story. Now, originally, my plan for the next episode of Clone Saga Quick Reviews was to check out the original Clone Saga. However, I think that might take a little bit more time than I need, and I want to stay as regular as I can with these videos. So for now, I think I'm just going to stick to the reading order from the Clone Saga Epic Collection. But we will talk about the original Clone Saga eventually, just not right now. Which means in the next episode of Clone Saga Quick Reviews, we'll be checking out Spectacular Spider-Man number 217. 13, and concluding the double with part 4, The Burial. But for now, that's gonna do it for this video. I wanna thank you so much for watching. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. As regular viewers know, I make a variety of content on my channel, and I'm always gonna make the videos that I wanna make. But if you see something you enjoy, make sure to let me know, and I'll try to prioritize that kind of content in the future. Over on Twitch, I typically play superhero games like Marvel's Avengers and Gotham Knights, and I also play the occasional horror game like Resident Evil. So if you wanna watch me play video games live, you can check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/carrotscraps. And all my other social media, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are at carrotscraps as well. So I want to thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. I cannot believe Grasshopper Man. That is one of the funnier reveals that I wasn't expecting to find in a Spider-Man comic, but also just in the back of a letters page. It makes me wonder how many other hidden gems there are in these letters pages, just waiting to be found. Grasshopper Man is not my new favorite superhero, but he's definitely a new special interest for me. And I know he is the hero that we've been waiting for in this new Zeb Wells Spider-Man run. We just need Grasshopper Man to reappear, and then Peter Parker's life will be fixed, and then he'll join the X-Men, I guess.